Now, across Texas, the issue is.
I'm Rudy Koski in Austin.
I'm Stephen Dial in Dallas.
And I'm Greg Grugan in Houston, and this is Texas, the issue is.
Governor Greg Abbott's border security action, known as Operation Lone Star, is now entering its third year. Texas National Guard members and state troopers continue to go through deployment cycles, and costs have now exceeded $2 billion. A growing number of people under the Capitol Dome here in Austin are wondering how this mission can continue as is. HB 20 was filed in an attempt to answer that question. The legislation drafted by State Representative Matt Schaefer would reorganize the mission by creating a new state border guard unit. The Republican from Tyler spoke to me about his plan.
Right now, the primary workforce, when you look at the just sheer quantity, comes from the Texas National Guard. Those are temporary workers. That sergeant who's standing by the river is really a diesel mechanic from East Texas. He has to go back to his job, and in fact, the state can only keep him on active duty orders for a certain period of time. So we have a temporary workforce that's applied against a full-time problem.
There are those who say that this is nothing but vigilantism.
These will be professional state employees under the authority of the Department of Public Safety Commission with a special authorization from the governor. They will have gone through training, they will have accountability, they will have rules, and they will function in many of the same ways that the Texas National Guard under Operation Lone Star are operating right now.
Will they be able to use deadly force?
So our officers are going to be able to protect themselves and have self-defense, but any type of use of force would only be done with the governor's authority.
How do you envision these encounters? Will they use handcuffs, tasers?
The Border Protection Unit officers will have the authority to do what they need to do to protect Texas at the river.
Will they be able to shoot back?
They would be able to protect themselves if they were ever, if their lives were in danger. But the primary thing that we want to do is create a deterrent at the river so that people will come into Texas the right way.
Will this guard be trained like DPS troopers, or are they going to be like the border volunteers, the ranchers who are out patrolling?
There will be no volunteers that are involved here. The Border Protection Unit will be a mixture of licensed peace officers and then individuals who've been trained and qualified to be part of the Border Protection Unit who will have limited arresting authority from the governor, exactly the way the Texas National Guard has now.
How large of a force could this be?
The goal is a gradual buildup of the Border Protection Unit, and hopefully then the Texas National Guard can decrease in number so that it begins to balance out.
Courts have said the border is the federal government's responsibility. Isn't this overreaching?
Certainly the other side will challenge this in court, and in some ways we're in uncharted territory. But I believe Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution talks about a state being in imminent danger. And when you have people dying, you have women and children being exploited in great numbers, then I believe Texans are in imminent danger, and we need to step up and take a fundamentally bolder approach.
A state lawmaker referred to this idea as creating death squads. How do you react to that?
That's just someone trying to scare people.
Your legislation gives these individuals civil and criminal protection.
These officers will have the same liability protections that our police officers and our sheriff's deputies have. No different.
Will there be some type of oversight?
The bill adds an inspector general, and there will be a legislative oversight committee.
Is this all about fighting the cartels, the fentanyl crisis? Is this the push?
The cartels are harming Texans. People have lost the peaceful use and enjoyment of their homes. Ranchers have had their fences cut, their livestock lost. Women afraid to be alone on their property without a gun. Women and children abandoned. Fentanyl deaths all over the state, all over the country at an enormous scale. It is time for the state of Texas to take a bolder, fundamentally new approach to how we handle the border crisis.
Well, time now for the Texas Trio to fall in and present a word. for what we just heard. My word is fortification. Greg, what's your word?
Rudy, my word is counterinsurgency.
Well, that's a big word. Stephen, what's your word?
I don't know if I can spell that word. My word is risky.
All right, well, we're all a little risky, right? With that, the Texas trio will reassemble after this break to talk about the possible border mission reboot. The Texas trio is back. My word earlier was fortification because Representative Schaefer has come up with an idea to make Operation Lone Star a more permanent and arguably manageable mission by setting up a Rio Grande Valley-based team. Stephen, North Texas residents will probably be told they won't lose any more troopers to border deployments with this idea. That's got to be a good selling point, right?
It depends on what you care about, right? So this will be an offshoot of DPS, like Representative Schaefer said, but you're swapping out Operation Lone Star with a more permanent solution. In his opinion, I think what North Texans are going to question is, one, how are you going to continue to fund it? And then two, and this is a question that I have, is this just going to go away when Ron DeSantis or someone on the Republican side of the aisle becomes president? It kind of just seems like window dressing to me when it comes to, I understand the intent. We have a problem at the border. Governor Abbott's solution is Operation Lone Star. Schaefer wants to slide in a more permanent solution, but I just don't really see that being a selling point of saying more troopers will be able to come up to North Texas.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Stephen. Greg, DPS has a Marine unit, so maybe this is kind of like an offshoot like that. But some immigration advocates, as expected, they have attacked this overall idea. What alternatives have you heard down in the Houston area?
Alternatives, aside from somehow forcing President Biden and the federal government to actually do the job, not many alternatives. Let's call this what it is, a rebranded expansion of DPS with both political and practical purposes. On the practical side, you replace part-time National Guard and state troopers uncomfortably deployed from across the Lone Star State with a new cohort of peace officers who actually live on or near the border. I mean, the need is real. Fentanyl, human trafficking, cartel violence, it's all real and costing lives each and every day. Now, on the political side, creation of a state border patrol highlights the fact that the federal border patrol isn't getting the job done. I've also heard that this proposal amounts to hyper-conservative cover for moderate House Speaker Dade Phelan, who can point to the border guard and say to the Republican base, look at what we did. Now, I know you guys remember constitutional carry. Is it really a coincidence that last session it was Matt Schaefer who carried that red meat measure as well?
You know, Stephen, when you brought up cost, and when talking about the cost and claims of success regarding Operation Lone Star, an article posted last year that's popular with critics quotes a statement made by a former East Texas lawmaker during a hearing in 2018, the late Dan Flynn. According to that article, he said, it's almost offensive to say, what are the results? We don't know how much Schaefer's bill will cost, but he told me he believes a border unit will eventually be more efficient than what's being done now. Do you think limited government Republicans in North Texas will buy that?
I mean, and going off of something that Greg mentioned, we have this huge surplus, right? And so there is a funding resource out there. It's just a matter of how can you consistently fund this. We don't know how much it costs. Greg also mentioned fentanyl. Up here in North Texas, we are really being hit with it. We had 3 students, middle and high school students, die in a couple months span. Okay, you have Operation Lone Star on the border that's supposed to stop the fentanyl from getting in. They're not. And so what's the difference if you just swap this out with a more permanent solution? So to answer your question as far as more, I guess, fiscally responsible or fiscally concerning Republicans in North Texas, I mean, funding is going to be a big part of this, but also stopping the drugs. Critic could say, well, Operation Lone Star is not stopping the drugs, so what would be the difference here?
Yeah, it's like the little Dutch boy trying to put his finger in the dike, and it still continues to flow. Hey, Greg, when I first heard about HB 20, you got to do this quick. I thought of the movie Machete. Do you think that's an over-type, cell? They called it death squads. A state lawmaker. Is that narrative sticking in Southeast Texas?
Well, just from the usual suspects, to borrow another movie title, what I am hearing is horror from middle-class families, too many of which are walking into bedrooms and finding a beloved child dead from a single fentanyl-laced pill. That's a genuine, real-time fear, not a hypothetical prediction of future abuse by paramilitary posses.
Stephen, does this survive a court challenge? Can it?
Well, Operation Lone Star has survived, right? But that's temporary Governor Abbott order. So we'll have to just wait and see. I mean, Operation Lone Star has been going on over a year. This is just a more permanent solution. It will definitely be challenged, of course.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap this up. To see this interview or any of the other past interviews that we have done, go to our station's YouTube page.
And continue the conversation with us on social media.
Hey, the legislative session is continuing to heat up. Join us next week for another hot topic. Until then, let us know what you think the issue is.